Welcome back to Odd Socks. So I thought because it's the beginning of April I would give you a bit of an update on some of our chilies. Now we sowed all these chilies on the 25th of January this year and they grew incredibly quick. Now the germination was literally within a few days of actually sowing the seeds, and it took us a bit by surprise because normally it would take a week or two to get any of them to germinate. Once we got them to germinate and we potted them on, they just continuously grew really well, which again took us by a bit of a surprise. In fact, they haven't stopped growing, and now it's become a bit of an issue because we are growing around 90 to 100 chilies, give or take either side. It's finding the space for them. Now we've struggled a little bit simply because of all this extra growth. One of the things we did after we took them out of the seed trays, we put them into small pots individually, and then we moved them up to these 1 litre pots where they have continuously kept on growing. As you can see from our system, this is just a makeshift pushed together metal frame hanging some old marine lights that we've actually had spare to grow these chilies indoors. Now I was not expecting the growth rate from these to be as good on these chilies as what they are, and that is what's probably caused our happy trouble, shall we say. Now there's an awful lot of chilies here, and this is only some of them. Now not all these are chili peppers, there is some peppers as well. I've got some little red cherry bombs, some paprika sweet peppers and some capia pointed peppers too. And these peppers will either go into the ground or they will be going into pots. The pots I'll be spreading between the 2 polytunnels that we've got going on, depending on space with our tomatoes, maybe in the greenhouse, all depending on space, because I'm rapidly running out of space in my greenhouses at the moment. So unfortunately, because I took my time on potting them on, some have actually started to flower. Now you can see these little flowers here growing on this particular one. Now this is from a seed packet which is a mixed Caribbean blend, so I have no idea what this one is. Now this one's looking a little bit droopy because it's due for a good water, but the reason why it's flowering so early is probably because it's probably pot bound. I can just start seeing roots here coming through. Now this one was one I potted up yesterday, and as you can see it's very large. This was again in a 1 litre pot and it desperately needed to be potted on. So I had some 10 litre pots. Now I was going to keep taking them up into individual slightly smaller pots as I went along, but I think this is big enough to actually handle this 10 litre pot. This will be going down the polytunnel as is. So with each variety that I did, I've done 2 that will go into these larger pots, and this is where it will stay now for the rest of the year. Now I've already picked the flowers off of this particular one because I want them to grow into strong plants before they think about fruiting. Now I've just popped that one back because I want to show you again this other little one. Now yes, it's looking a little bit droopy, it needs a bit of a water, and I'm not going to lie, this system, because of how deep it is to water, has proven a little bit more difficult to get the watering right, which has caused a few issues here and there. But the main reason, like I've said, this is flowering and actually fruiting. You can see little chili peppers growing here, is because it needs a bigger pot. But what I'm going to do, because it is only the beginning of April and I want this plant to focus on growing, I'm actually going to take these flowers and the fruits actually off of this plant. Now I can hear a lot of you saying, but that's your fruit for the year and you're running that risk. Well, actually I want it to focus on good root growth and to get a little bit bigger. Now I could just grow this plant for the chilies that I'm going to get off of it now, but I want to make sure that it's got a really strong root system. And by removing these flowers and these fruits now, and then moving it into a bigger pot, I'm hopefully going to allow this plant to keep growing a little bit longer before these flowers turn into fruits. The reason why the chili plant wants to do this is because it thinks it's actually running out of soil. So it's desperately trying to produce fruit to produce for next year's offspring. So because it's so early in April, I am removing all the flowers and all the chilies that I find on all of these plants, which there is a large majority of these chili plants that have actually started to flower. Now this area in their dining room, which is offset to the kitchen, gets very, very warm, which again has proven a little bit difficult to actually maintain the chilies. It's not the most ideal area, great for the warmth, but when you have your oven on, it really does blast out an awful lot of heat. So that's all these chili peppers and flowers off of this particular plant. And now hopefully the plant will refocus on the roots as soon as I get these into the new pot. Now this is the new pot that it's going into. Now the 10-litre pots that I've done yesterday, I want to put a few more into some 10-litre pots once I go and get some more compost. But the rest will be potted up into these 3-litre pots. And they'll stay in these 3-litre pots until they go down to the allotment now. Now there should be enough room, there's enough of a difference between these two pots for this to be reasonably happy for at least another month. I'm not wasting too much compost, because all these plants that will be going into these pots will be going directly into the beds, either in the polytunnel or the greenhouse. I'm only actually going to be growing a certain amount into the large pots themselves. Now that's why I've gone for the 10-litre pots for those, because they won't be potted on again. And keeping them in those 10-litre pots, it will allow them to fill that pot with their root system and then start setting fruit. But at the moment it's just a little bit too early, and I will definitely want bigger plants. So if you have got a chili plant that is flowering very early on, like it is now the beginning of April really, you're probably better off removing those fruits and those flowers to give that plant a little bit of time to actually focus on its growth rather than producing its fruit. Now there is a few exceptions when you have certain types of chilies that really do need an exceptionally long time to actually grow and ripen. But in general, I think all of these that I've got here, I shouldn't have too much of a problem with. Plus most of these chili plants are far too small, and I won't actually get a half decent crop of them. Well, not what I'm after anyway. Now one of the issues that we have got, like I've mentioned before, was the watering. Now with chili peppers, they're incredibly fussy when it comes to watering. They don't like it too wet, and then if they get too dry, they start drooping. Now what I've found here, because I'm not able to reach everything all in one go, I've been filling this area with a little bit of water on the bottom for them to soak up that water from the bottom, because chili peppers do better by having that bottom watering system. Some of them have been getting far too much, and this is what's happened with these. Now this has got oedema. You can see the leaves there, and there's little bumps all over it. It's where the plant's trying to get rid of that excess water, probably minerals or anything else that it doesn't need at the moment. And that's what causes these bumps and lumps over your leaves. Now this one's looking pretty sorry for itself, but it is having new growth coming through, which is great. So what I do have to be careful with is how I'm watering these chilies. They don't want to stay in a load of wet water, but they also need regular watering too. So it really is a fine balance. And when you've got this amount of chili peppers, it becomes a bit of an issue. Now we knew it was going to be a little bit more of an issue because we were growing so many this year. But like I said before, we were not expecting the vast majority of these chili peppers to get as big as what they are right now in such a short space of time. But this will be fine. So long as it's producing new leaves, these other leaves will become redundant. They can be removed. And then we can monitor the watering a little bit more efficient, because these leaves won't necessarily photosynthesize, so they're not doing any good for the plant. but it's also not killing the plant necessarily. So it's not a massive issue, but it is a sign that you are actually overwatering your chilli plants. And obviously if you're underwatering, you will get those droopy leaves. Now chillies actually do like it quite dry, but there's an extreme between one or the other, and at our point we normally get the edema happen within 24 hours after a good watering, and then it kind of subsides over the next few days before the next watering. It can be quite hard to get the right amount of water into your chilli plants, but majority of these will be fine. And like I said, we have sown so many, we'll still have plenty of good healthy plants by the time they go down to the allotment. Now what I have to do is go through all of these chilli peppers I have here, all the ones I have on a south facing living room window, and some of the ones I've got underneath an old light as well. And I need to remove all these flowers, make sure that they've got plenty of water, or make sure that I'm drying them out a little bit if they've got too wet, and hopefully within the next 3-4 weeks they'll be down the allotment and in their places ready to grow on. Now me removing all these fruits and flowers shouldn't be too much of an issue, because there is still plenty of time for these plants to flower and to fruit. But that is our chilli plants so far. Now it could have gone better, but trust me, it could have been an awful lot worse for these chilli plants. And to be honest, they're not a bad size. Now this is one of the, I would say, medium size chilli plants, and it's doing really well. Now this is a jalapeno, an early jalapeno. But that's it, that's our chillies, that's what we were doing. And all I've got to do now is move all of these 1 litre pot ones into their 3 litre pots. And that's something I'm going to have to do over the next day or two, otherwise it could cause a lot more damage and I might not be able to fix any issues that I've got with some of these plants. Once they're potted on, I'll give them a good water in their new pots, and then they shouldn't need any watering for a little while at least. But that's an awful lot of chilli peppers, but in general they are looking really good with plenty of new growth. I just was not expecting this setup to grow these chillies quite as well as what they have done. And I think next year, if we grow many chillies, which I don't think we need to next year, because we will still have plenty of chillies left over from this year, but if we do, hopefully I won't be caught out with the way that we're growing them this year. So guys, just let me know in the comments what varieties and how well your chillies are growing. I do really love to hear and see all the different ways people grow their chilli plants each year. I'm really hoping that the vast majority of these actually do survive to getting outside, because that's the key. You might be able to grow them to a certain size. It's actually keeping them healthy and happy all the way to when they start fruiting. But I'm happy so far. Yes, I've had a couple of losses, but when you're planting and sowing anything, you're always going to have some losses somewhere along the line. But I think by the time these go down, yes, I'll probably have a couple of more losses, but in general I think they'll be happy and healthy. And hopefully this year a really good harvest of tasty hot chilli peppers.